All right, get this. Remember that feeling when you drop your phone and like secretly kind of hope it would break? Just so you had a good excuse to get a shiny new one?
Oh, yeah.
Nokia phones. Total buzzkill for that.
Right.
These things were practically indestructible.
Yeah.
But there's this wild story behind that like indestructible shell. We're doing a deep dive into Nokia's incredible journey.
Yeah.
How they went from being like the kings of the mobile world to almost vanishing. And then get this, making a comeback that nobody saw coming.
Yeah, it's a story that goes way beyond ringtones and those super addictive snake games. We're talking about a company that like understood how to dominate a market in a way that few others ever have, and what happens when that dominance is challenged by a completely new way of thinking.
So rewind with me to the late 90s, early 2000s. Nokia was the name in mobile. Seriously, everyone and their grandma had one.
Absolutely.
Remember the Nokia 3310? You could practically hammer nails with that thing.
Right. Indestructible.
By 2008, they were absolutely crushing it. They had over $76 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
But then enter the iPhone.
Ah, yes, 2007. The game changed forever. The iPhone, it wasn't just a phone, it was like a cultural phenomenon.
It really was.
Sleek design, that intuitive touchscreen, it was a total revolution.
And Nokia's reaction, they basically shrugged and were like, it's too expensive, too fragile. It's almost unthinkable now.
Right.
But there's a fascinating lesson here about how even the most successful companies can totally miss the boat. Like, they just ignore this disruptive innovation.
Yeah, it's a classic case of what we call the innovator's dilemma. When you're at the top of your game, it's incredibly difficult to see the next big wave coming, especially if it, disrupts your own winning formula.
Makes sense.
Our sources suggest that Nokia really relied heavily on these internal reports, market analyses. And those reports, they reinforce their existing strengths, things like battery life and durability, which, to be fair, were fantastic.
Yeah.
But what they missed was this fundamental shift in what consumers actually wanted. They wanted a more interactive, app-driven experience.
And that's where the iPhone really blew everything out of the water, right? The App Store changed everything. Suddenly your phone wasn't just for, making calls and playing Snake. It was like a portal to a whole universe of apps and possibilities.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding the software side of things becomes absolutely crucial. Nokia was still clinging to its Symbian operating system, which, compared to Apple's iOS, well, it felt clunky.
Yeah.
Outdated.
For sure.
Symbian was, a pioneer in the smartphone era, but it had this core architecture that made it really difficult for developers to create the kinds of sophisticated, visually rich apps that users were starting to demand.
So Nokia tries to play catch-up, right? They released the N97 in 2009. It had all the bells and whistles, a good camera, GPS, even slide-out keyboard.
I don't know where I remember those.
But it just couldn't compete with the iPhone's software and that exploding app ecosystem.
Yeah. The N97 was a classic example of a company trying to bolt all these new features onto an outdated platform. I mean, the hardware was decent, but the software experience just wasn't there.
And then comes 2010. Enter Stephen Elop, the new CEO. And he gives this speech that would go down in tech history. The burning platform speech. Imagine a new CEO coming in and being like, hey, team, we are standing on a platform that's on fire, and we need to jump now.
Talk about a wake-up call, right?
Yeah,
Elop knew that drastic measures were needed,
Yeah.
and his solution, partner with Microsoft, ditch their trusty but aging Symbian operating system in favor of the shiny new Windows Phone OS.
Wow.
It was a huge gamble, a huge risk.
And did that gamble pay off? So did that gamble pay off?
Sadly, more like pouring water on a grease fire,
Oh, no.
The Windows Phone, it had potential, don't get me wrong, but it just couldn't gain traction against the big guys. Apple's iOS and Google's Android were already so established.
It really is mind-boggling, though, how a company like Microsoft, with all its resources, they couldn't make it work. What went wrong?
Well, a few things. Remember the app ecosystem we talked about?
Yeah.
Developers, they were already all over iOS and Android, right?
Yeah.
Drawn in by the sheer number of users on those platforms.
Right.
Windows Phone, even with its slick design and Microsoft's backing, it just struggled to attract developers and, crucially, users.
Right.
It was a classic chicken and egg problem. No users, no developers, fewer apps, and that made the platform less appealing to, well, users.
A vicious cycle. It's crazy how quickly the mobile market can turn on you.
Absolutely. And for Nokia, well, the financial strain was really starting to show. Between 2011 and 2014, their smartphone sales, completely dwarfed by their competitors.
Wow.
By 2014, Microsoft saw an opportunity, in the wreckage. They acquired Nokia's struggling mobile phone division for $7.2 billion.
You'd think that would be it for Nokia, right?
Yeah.
Absorbed into the Microsoft Borg, never to be seen again.
You'd think so, but this is Nokia we're talking about. They had a hidden ace up their sleeve. Or
Also-
remember all that revenue they were pulling in back in their glory days?
Yeah.
A lot of it. It wasn't just from those iconic phones.
Right.
It was from something a little less flashy, but absolutely essential. Nokia Solutions and Networks. Their telecommunications infrastructural division.
Wait, so while everyone was busy playing Snake on their Nokias,
Yeah,
the company was also building the technology that connected those phones in the first place.
exactly. And that's where our next key player comes in. Rajeev Suri.
Yep.
Suri takes over as CEO in 2014, right when Nokia is at its lowest point.
Right.
Instead of trying to chase that consumer market, Suri makes a bold decision. He doubles down on Nokia's strengths, telecommunications and networking.
So they went from making the phones to building the technology that powers those phones. It's like they went from baking the bread to milling the flour.
That's a great analogy. And one area where Suri saw a massive opportunity was in 5G. You see, 5G isn't just like a little upgrade from 4G. It's a total shift in how we think about wireless communication.
For those of us who don't speak fluent tech, what exactly is 5G and why should we care? It sounds like one of those things that's going to make my internet faster, but is that really all it is?
Oh, it is so much more than that. Imagine downloading a high-definition movie in seconds. Imagine self-driving cars that can communicate with each other instantly to prevent accidents. Imagine doctors performing remote surgeries with zero lag. That's the promise of 5G.
Okay, now you've blown my mind. Tell me more about how Nokia fits into all of this.
Nokia, with Suri at the helm, they positioned themselves at the forefront of this 5G revolution.
Wow.
They shifted their focus away from those consumer devices. Instead, they focused on building the infrastructure, the backbone, really, that enables this super fast, ultra-reliable connectivity. We're talking massive antenna arrays, sophisticated software to manage data flow, the works.
So instead of trying to compete in that crowded smartphone arena, they decided to build the arena itself.
Exactly. And it was a brilliant move. By 2020, just 6 years after making the strategic shift, Nokia's revenue was back up to over $20 billion. They had gone from almost collapsing to becoming a major player in one of the most transformative technologies of our time.
Talk about a comeback story. From almost down for the count to building the technology of the future. Nokia's story is proof that even when it seems like the end, you can totally reinvent yourself.
Oh, absolutely. It's a testament to how adaptable and resilient a company can be. Think about it. They were synonymous with mobile phones, right?
Right.
And then they almost completely disappeared, only to come back as a major force behind 5G.
It really makes you wonder, how did they pull it off? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think part of it was recognizing that the game had changed.
Okay.
They knew they couldn't just keep doing the same thing. They couldn't compete with Apple and Samsung on the same playing field.
Right.
They had to play to their strengths, use their expertise in a different arena.
And that's what they did.
Exactly. They focused on network infrastructure, and crucially, they embraced 5G early on.
It's like that saying, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. But Nokia, they didn't just smile, they built something extraordinary.
They really did. They didn't get stuck in the past trying to regain their former glory. They adapted, they innovated, and they found a whole new path to success.
There's definitely a lesson there for all of us.
Oh, absolutely. Nokia's journey is like a giant reminder that change, even though it's hard and unpredictable, it can also be incredibly freeing.
Yeah, for sure.
It can open up doors you didn't even know existed, new opportunities, new possibilities.
It's like those burning platform moments we were talking about. Sometimes you got to go through the fire to come out stronger.
Hmm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nokia's story, what are your takeaways? What really stood out to you?
I think for me, it's how bold they were. To reinvent themselves like that, they could have easily just faded away, become another cautionary tale. But they didn't. They chose to write their own story, embrace the change, and they emerged as a leader in a whole new field.
Wow.
It reminds us that we're all capable of so much more than we think.
Perfectly said. It's a story about resilience, about having a vision, and about that human ability to overcome anything. Nokia's journey is a good reminder that we create our own future. It's not something that just happens to us. We make choices. We take risks. And sometimes those risks lead to amazing things. So next time you hear about 5G, think about Nokia. It's a story about never giving up and always being ready for what's next.